All right, let's go ahead and kick this off. My name is Kim Kranz. I'm the Chief of Athlete Wellness at USA Gymnastics. Thank you all for joining us today. Really appreciate you taking time out of the day to be here. If you have questions during the presentation, you can either put those in the chat or in the Q&A. I'll kind of be monitoring both of those spaces for questions. This webinar will be recorded, and the recording will be available online, maybe by the end of the day today, probably tomorrow for sure. So I'm really excited to welcome back Karen Kogan. Karen is a senior sports psychologist at the USOPC. The webinar that she's going to be doing today is titled Using Imagery in Gymnastics to Get the Mental Edge. And this is the third in a series of sports psychology webinars that she's done for us. Those are also available online, and I'll throw the link in the chat a little bit later. And she will have a few more webinars for us too as part of this series. So really want to thank her for doing that for us. Dr. Kogan is a licensed psychologist and a certified mental performance consultant. She currently works at the U.S. Olympic Committee as the sports psychologist for acrobat and combat sports. Throughout her career, she's consulted with numerous individual athletes and teams, including our own USAG national teams, the U.S. Freestyle Mogul Ski Team, the U.S. Taekwondo Team, the University of North Texas Athletic Department, and many athletes through her private practice. She has attended 6 Olympic Games as the sports psychology consultant for several Olympic medalists and their coaches. Karen obtained her PhD in counseling psychology from The Ohio State University, right? And completed her clinical internship at the University of California, San Diego. She earned her MS in kinesiology with a sports psychology emphasis from UCLA and her BA in psychology also from UCLA. She has published in sport-related journals and presented papers at regional and national conferences. In 2000, she published her first book, Sports Psychology Library, Gymnastics. She is a member of the American Psychological Association and has held positions of secretary, treasurer, and council representative for the Exercise and Sports Psychology Division 47 of APA. She's also a member of the Association for Applied Sports Psychology and has served on the executive board as well as several committees for that organization. I think most importantly, those are amazing credentials. Karen was also a competitive gymnast for 10 years. So she gets our sport, she understands it, and she competed in college on UCLA's nationally ranked gymnastics team. So we are really, really excited, Karen, to have you back. I thank you again for working with us. And I'm gonna turn it over to you and let you get started.
Well, thanks, Kim, for that wonderful introduction. That way I don't have to tell you guys anything more. I can just jump right in here. But I am really happy to talk to you today about imagery. I think it's a very useful tool in all sports, but particularly in sports like gymnastics and diving and things like that, where you're doing acrobatic moves and being able to imagine those and feel them and see them in your mind ahead of time is really important, I think, in terms of your training. You know, it's also adds to when you can't train physically, like this quarantine time we've had, you know, when physical training was cut down, imagery is a great tool to use then, and or if you're injured. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go on. But give me a moment here just to share my screen. I wanted to bring up my presentation. So hold on just a minute while I find that one. It's going to take me just a minute. Okay.
While you're looking, I did put in the chat a link to all of our recorded webinars on the USAG website. So check that out after this webinar if you're interested in seeing some more of Karen's talks.
Yeah, for some reason it's not popping up here. Just I seem to have these difficulties.
Let me see.
So yeah, hold on. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to close down everything else because maybe that's part of the problem.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, I think I just had too many other things open. And
We are all multitasking these days.
oh my gosh, I know. Okay, let me see if I can try it one more time here. Huh.
Can you email it to me or something? Maybe I can share it on mine.
Yeah, I might have to do that. Okay.
Okay. Sorry,
So
everybody.
yeah, sorry everybody. I always think I'm ready to go and then something.
Yeah.
But okay, so let me just, if you'll give me a moment, I'm going to send this to Kim. And then I'll just start talking. In the meantime, while I'm doing this, all of you can practice your mental imagery, right? Okay, let's see. Yeah, you know.
So what I can do, Karen, is we can attach your slides as a PDF to the
Yes.
when we post it online.
Okay. That would be good. Okay. So I'll get going here. All right, so sorry for the delay. These things happen though, and we all have to learn how to manage it, especially in this time of technology. But as I said, I think this is really a valuable tool for all of you to use. And before I jump into the content of what I'm going to talk about, I'd like to try something with you first. And I'm going to ask you just to close your eyes for a moment. I'll guide you through something quickly. And I want you to just attend to what your experience of it is. So just take a moment and get yourself comfortable. And you can be sitting up probably. I don't want you to get too comfortable and fall asleep. So let's see if we can do this sitting up. And gently allow your eyes to close. And as you're doing that, you can imagine yourself in your gym, the gym you train in, and imagine yourself walking into practice for the day. And you open the door, you step in, you look around, and you take in the gym around you. You're noticing the equipment and where it's laid out. It's very familiar to you. You're noticing the walls around you. Maybe they're posters or things painted on the walls. There are colors that jump out at you maybe. And you might notice the people all gathering, coaches, teammates, people beginning to warm up. And you notice yourself beginning to warm up, walking over to where you usually warm up. Maybe you can start to feel your body moving a little bit, the muscles starting to loosen up. And you take in a deep breath as you get ready to begin your practice, taking in the image around you and imprinting that in your mind, just noticing what you see. Okay, I'm going to ask you to open your eyes now, and we'll come back to that. But just remember what that was like for you and in that image in your mind. And so when I talk about imagery, I'm talking about creating a picture in your mind's eye, kind of like what you just did. And most of us do that a lot. Oftentimes we don't even realize we're doing it, but whether you've used imagery formally as a sports psychology training tool or not, you probably do it, especially in gymnastics. You probably picture yourself doing things all the time. I remember always picturing my dream routine on bars and things like that, you know, just to knowing I would never be able to do all that and put all that together, but maybe someday, wouldn't it be amazing if I could put that routine together? And so a lot of us do that, I think, as we think about skills and routines and competitions, maybe doing it without even knowing it. But there are some general things that make imagery more useful, and I'm going to go through those with you today, and then we're going to practice at the end here. But the basic things around imagery, and I call it imagery as opposed to visualization. A lot of people call it visualization, and that's fine. That's really, though, that's focused more on the visual part of it, what you see, and that's great. You want to be able to see things, but when I think about imagery, I think about using all the senses and creating a really very realistic image of everything you experience. So it's not just the visual part. And I think imagery is just more encompassing and a broader term. So when we do imagery, we want it to be vivid. We want it to be real. So you're using all 5 of your senses. And the second really important thing is that we want it to be controlled. So you want to manipulate your images to make them do what you want. And as I talk to athletes, a lot will say, you know, I was trying to imagine that, but I couldn't see a good outcome. And that's a common issue, but it is something that we want to try to address, you know, because we want, in the end, we want you to be seeing the outcome you want. You want to complete the skill, you want to stick the landing, you know, you want to do it correctly. You're not wanting to fall. And sometimes our minds do funny things with us, and we then end up falling when we don't mean to, and it's frustrating. So then we stop using imagery. But I think that we can work around that. As I go through this, I'll give you some ideas for how to do that. So when do we do imagery? You know, we can do imagery anytime. As I like to say, you take your head with you everywhere you go. And if you're sitting and waiting for something or don't know what to do with yourself, don't tell me you're bored, because I'll give you a few things you can do here, one of them being imagery. You can use it really anytime. It's certainly really helpful before and after practice. So beforehand, thinking about what you want to do going in. Afterwards, to review what you've done well, we want to solidify that in our mind. And sometimes to redo the things that didn't go well, so you end your practice always on a good note. So before and after practice, before and after a meet, same idea, you know, to prepare ahead of time, to review afterwards, and to redo in your mind afterwards if you need to. It can also be useful between events or between days of competition, and during your time away from the gym, or when recovering from an injury, as I mentioned before. I will say one thing, though, to keep in mind. Some of us in sports, we tend to think a lot and we tend to overthink. And if you're someone who overthinks a lot, sometimes doing imagery right before you go into the gym or between events or between turns, it can cause you to feel like you're thinking a little bit too much. So if that's the case for you, you might want to do your imagery more outside of the gym. But sometimes, you know, if it helps you just to quickly review in your mind, close your eyes, review in your mind what's your next skill you're working on, or what's the next routine you're working on. If that helps you in the gym, then do it. But you'll have to experiment a little bit and know yourself. This is flexible though. We do it in a way that it helps, and if it doesn't help, then we don't do it. So know yourself. I think that's one of the main messages I want you to hear from this. So why do we use imagery? Well, it helps us to relax if we're feeling super anxious or stressed. One of the things it can do is help us relax. It can also help us activate our energy. So if we're feeling low energy and low motivation, it can also help us bring that up. So if we imagine something energizing, that can help bring the energy level up. It helps with our goal setting, because if you can't see in your mind the goal you want to achieve, sometimes it's a lot harder to get there. So it helps toward goal setting. It helps with our self-confidence, imagining yourself being confident, walking tall, doing your routines with confidence and grace. That can up our self-confidence. It helps with our focus. It helps with recovering from injury. I'm going to mention a little bit more about that right now. With injury, oftentimes, we're out of the gym, can't do as much as we want to. If it's been a surgery, you're going to be sitting around for a little bit. This is the perfect time to do imagery. And not only can you imagine the gymnastics that you would be doing at this time, you can also imagine the injury itself healing. And I know this sounds kind of like, wow, could this even be possible? But your mind is really powerful, and we often don't use our mind to its capacity. And so if let's say that you broke a bone and you're waiting for it to heal, it's in a cast. Well, you can imagine the bone growing stronger, the calcium building up, the blood flowing to the injury, trying to heal it. You can imagine these things going on in your body, and it actually does encourage the blood to flow toward that area, which is going to improve your healing. So if you can, it doesn't really matter if you know what a broken bone healing looks like. You make something up in your mind, you focus on that area of your body, and it's another tool that can help with your healing. So these are just a few things that you can use it for, as well, correcting mistakes. If you're struggling with something and can't quite get it right, if you can start to see it in your mind's eye, then that can lead you toward making those corrections. So number of ways you can use it. You choose what is going to help you the most. So let me give you some ideas on how to best use it. And the first thing is to use all of your senses, which I mentioned before, and hopefully you'll be able to see my slide deck once we're done here. But I have right now on this slide a multicolored square, and as you look at it, that's what we want to see. We want to see in vivid color. And when I asked you to imagine going into your gym at the beginning, think about how you saw that. Did you see it in color? Did you see it in black and white? We want to make things realistic. So if you're seeing in black and white, you might want to work on seeing in color. We also want to hear the sounds around us, and that's not something we always do when we think about visualizing. But as I gave you that example in the beginning, think about, did you hear things? I asked you to think about people being there in the gym, and usually, you hear people talking, moving around, bouncing on the floor, whatever. You hear the sounds that go along with the gym. Think about if you heard that in that first example I gave you. We also work with smell. Again, not something that we tend to think about so much when we're using visualization, but can you smell what it's like in a gym? Maybe it's not a great smell, but there's a certain smell that goes along with gymnastics and mats and chalk and things like that. So you want to be able to smell that in your mind. And then feeling the air around you, feeling how your body moves and feels. And finally, taste. Again, another thing that we tend not to do so much when we're visualizing. But with imagery, we want to incorporate that. So you're taking a drink of water and feeling the cool water going down your throat. So when you create an image, you want to try to use all of these things. And I think people are more inclined to use the visualization part and maybe the feeling part. But see if you can be more intentional about including hearing and smell and taste and things like that. So that's your first thing, use all of your senses. Secondly, developing control of your imagery and imagining positive outcomes. Super important to do, but not always easy. And this does require consistent practice. So imagery is like anything else you do. And if you've listened to the other two webinars that I've done, we talk about practicing over and over again. These mental skills are not things that you just gain by doing it once today with me. This is something that you want to integrate into part of your training. So to develop control over your images, you want to practice it, you know, generally on a daily basis, not every day. You don't have to do it every day, but make it a part of your routine, make it something consistent. And this will help you develop that control. Don't give up in the beginning if it seems like you can't quite get it. It's something that you will get over time. You got to be persistent on that. The third guideline is to use internal and external imagery. So what I mean by that is when I asked you to think about that scene in the beginning, you can see it in a couple of different angles. One is looking out of your own eyes, looking at what you see right in front of you, and that's internal imagery. And then the other way is external imagery, and that's like if you were watching yourself on a video. And both of those can be very important. So think about the example we did earlier. Were you looking outside of your own eyes, or were you watching yourself even in the gym with people moving around? So both of these are useful. And you know, we used to think that maybe internal was a little better because that's how you really do see things around you, and that's more realistic. But I think also external can be valuable too. You know, you can see how you want to look to the outside world. And we do so much watching of videos and things like that, and that's the external perspective. And that's okay to integrate. So I do encourage you to try to experiment with both. But for sure in gymnastics, I think it is useful to use the internal part because that really encourages you to feel what you're doing, to feel the action. And that's super useful when it comes to acrobatic sports. So practicing regularly, that practice makes permanent. I think I hit that on my point a little bit ago, but practice makes permanent. I want you to keep that in mind as you go forward with this. Fifth, we want to practice imagery in a relaxed state when we're learning. So when we're doing anything new, it helps to be relaxed, not distracted, and not anxious. We can focus more on what we're trying to do. But that is not typically the way we compete and train. There's a lot going on. Sometimes we feel anxious. So as you get better at this, then you do want to challenge yourself to move into a more distracted state and practice your imagery when there are other things going on around you. So sometimes it's good to come to the gym early, and as people are filing in and there's noise going on and things going on, practice your imagery. See if you can keep the focus. It's a bit of a challenge to yourself. The sixth thing is to develop coping strategies through imagery. And this is where you get to practice with things that could go wrong. So I did say that you want to always have a positive outcome, and that's true. But imagery is also a useful tool for walking through things ahead of time that could happen. So what happens if the floor music stops? What do you do? If you haven't thought about it ahead of time, you might be caught off guard. Or what happens if there's a delay because there's a problem with the scoring system, or the judges need to have a conference or something, and you're ready to go, and all of a sudden there's a delay. And what do? Because then you start to feel more anxious. Okay, in your mind's eye, work through, what do I do if something happens that I don't expect? How do I handle that? How do I keep my focus? How do I keep on track? So if you review these things in your mind beforehand, if you think through a plan, it's easier to deal with them when they actually happen. So again, we want to see positive outcomes, but we can also use this as a tool for dealing with the unexpected. The next idea is around focus, and on my slide, which you can't see, but hopefully you will see later, I have the word focus in red, and then all these other words around it. And how do you keep your focus? Well, imagery can be used to maintain that focus. So you can use cues or triggers to help in your imagery rehearsal. So you can use cue words to remind you. So for instance, if you're going through a routine in your mind, you might remember at one point, okay, I have to have my arms here, or I have to push hard, or I have to finish strong. You can use cue words and cue phrases as you go through your imagery to help keep you on track. One of the things I hear from athletes is, I can't keep my concentration. I start to imagine and then my mind goes somewhere else and I never finish the routine. And again, that's a pretty normal thing. But if you have cue words that you're using as you go along, you can keep yourself on track a little bit more. So that's another helpful thing that you can do. Number 8, we want to practice kinesthetic imagery. And what I mean by that is the feeling that you get. So not only are you seeing what's happening, but you're actually feeling it. And you'll see athletes sometimes as they're getting ready to compete, standing off to the side before their routine. I see this a lot on men's pommel horse and sometimes balance beam for women. But you see them eyes closed and you can see their shoulders moving, their arms moving, their bodies moving just slightly. You can see them going through their routine and there's an actual physical movement. It's not the complete skill, but it's a model of sorts of the movement. And this is really important to be able to feel in your mind's eye, to feel what it's going to be like. And so sometimes if you have trouble actually visualizing, I suggest that you focus more on the kinesthetic part, the feeling part of it, because that's what you need to do for gymnastics. Number 9, we want to image in real time. And so what I mean by this is that you take the same amount of time to do your imagery as it does to do the actual skill. So for instance, on vault, that's going to be over pretty quickly. So your imagery is going to be fairly fast, seconds. Whereas on floor, we're looking at a minute and a half or so. So that's going to take you a little bit longer. But you don't want to rush through this. You don't want to go, okay, now I'm on beam. Okay, boom, boom, boom. Okay, my series, my dismount off. Okay, done. That's not really helping you get in tune with what it's like to do the routine. You want to take the same amount of time and do your skills in real time. Now, the exception is if you're having difficulty seeing your image come out the way you hope. Let's say, for instance, that you see yourself, you keep falling or you keep over-rotating or under-rotating or something. In a case like that, I do suggest that you try to slow your imagery down and go frame by frame. So in doing that, you can see yourself at the right place at every point doing the skill. So on the takeoff, going up in the air, as you flip, as you twist, as you come down, as you land. At each point along the way, you want to see yourself in the right position. And then you can gradually speed that up, go a little bit faster, but maybe not quite real time. Eventually you can get it up to real time, and that oftentimes will help you get that image to work clearer in your mind. But if you start to have trouble, then back up again and go a little slower. So that's the only exception to when you may not be doing your imagery in real time. It's when you are having trouble. So ultimately, you want to be doing your routines and your skills in real time, but sometimes it'll help you to slow it down just a bit. And then finally, I suggest that you track what you're doing with your imagery. So you can use a log of sorts where you have the date, the time, and what you did. So, you might say on April 28th at 4:30 p.m., I practiced my floor routine. I did that for 10 minutes. And then have some kind of evaluation of how you did. So for instance, I imagined my floor routine fine, but I couldn't always land my tumbling passes very well. So that's then something that you might want to go back and work on. Or you might say, wow, yeah, I could image that really clearly and did a great routine, ended just the way I wanted to. So that's a positive outcome. But it's always about learning and getting better. We're not going to beat ourselves up if we can't quite see it enough, or maybe we only did 5 minutes that day because that's all the time you had. Great. 5 minutes is better than nothing. I say do whatever you can, and don't beat yourself up if you feel that you're not sticking to some specific plan that you had. Just come back and try to get on track the next day. So those are some guidelines and some thoughts about using imagery. I think it's really a wonderful tool, and now we're going to try it. We're going to practice with it, because I think that that's the important thing here. You're probably tired of hearing me talk without seeing the visuals, because I had some really great pictures there. But now we're going to try it, and you're going to create the pictures in your own mind. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to set you up in a competition situation. And I realize that many of you probably have not competed for a while. That's okay. What's good about imagery is that you can get back into that competition mentality. And we all know that when we compete, we feel a little more anxious, some more nerves. There's a lot of other things going on. And there is a certain skill that comes along with doing that. So when you're doing it pretty consistently during the season, you kind of get used to it. It never really goes away necessarily, the anxiety, but you get used to it. You find a rhythm, you know how to work with it. When we're out of practice with competition, sometimes we feel a little bit rusty, and that's where imagery can help. So even though I know competition might seem very far away at the moment, we're going to try this and kind of bring you back to that. And so it is helpful maybe to think about a competition that you have experienced in the past, maybe, probably one that you did really well. Let's focus on that. So a competition that you did well in, if one's not coming to mind easily, you can make it up. That's the great thing about imagery. You can do anything you want with this. So we're going to think about a competition environment situation. And the difficulty for me in doing a group imagery like this is everybody's a little bit different. And so I'm going to do my best to make it somewhat general, yet also create a structure. And as I'm going through, if something that I'm saying does not make sense to you in your world, feel free to change it. Just make the adjustment yourself. You know, if I'm telling you to imagine the balance beam and you're a guy and you don't do the balance beam, then imagine pommel horse or something like that. So I'll try not to be too specific on the event itself. I'll let you fill in that gap, but again, make this yours, make this work for you as we go through it. All right, so first we'll do just a sort of a short relaxation, kind of get settled in, and then we'll turn ourselves to the imagery. So I'd like you to sit back now, find yourself a seated position. You can lie down if you'd like, but if you are feeling the least bit sleepy or tired, I suggest sitting up, because otherwise you may fall asleep and you won't get the full benefit of going through the imagery with me. So seated if you can, and in a comfortable position, and just when you're ready, allowing your eyes to close so that we can tune out the visual distractions around us. And taking in a couple of deep breaths at your own pace, all the way in, and exhaling all the way out. And doing that one more time. And as you're doing this, noticing that your body is beginning to relax and settle in. You might notice that there are some areas of tension that you're feeling. Sometimes we hold tension in different areas of our body. Just notice where that might be for you. Could be your head, your neck area, could be stomach. Just noticing that. And if you want, allowing it to release, maybe shaking it out a bit. What we're trying to do here is get connected to our body, letting go of whatever might have happened to you already today, things that you might have coming in the future, but just coming into the present. And let's turn our attention to the image that I'll help you create in your mind's eye. And I'd like you to pull up that image of a meet where you performed well. You're happy with how things went. It may not have been perfect, but overall, you felt really good about what you did. And again, if you're not able to find this image easily, make one up. Make up a competition where you do it the way you hope. And I'd like you to imagine walking into the competition area the day that you'll compete. Getting ready for warm-ups. You walk in the door and you look around. You take it all in. So you see the gym, you see how the equipment is set up. Noticing the colors around you, the colors of the mats. Posters on the wall, signs. Where the officials' table is set up. Just scanning the room, looking around you. Noticing the details. And as you take a breath in, just noticing the smells. Maybe there's not that much that you can notice that way, but maybe it's just clean air, just taking in a breath or two. And you're noticing the people around you now. Other competitors are starting to come in, coaches, families in the stands, people running the meet. You just notice as you look around, hearing the murmur of their voices, sounds of the equipment, just taking in all the sounds. And as you're walking in, noticing maybe that your mouth is a little dry, you need some water, taking a sip of water, noticing the cool water in your mouth, down your throat, feeling that hydration that will help you to compete. And as you finish taking your drink of water, you begin walking over to the area that you'll warm up. You can feel your body moving, legs propelling you, arms swinging, putting down your bag and getting ready, getting situated, and imagine yourself beginning your warm-up. Maybe start by jogging a little bit, running, moving, whatever you tend to do. Just begin to notice that your body is moving, the muscles are getting warmer. And as you go through your warm-up routine, maybe even begin to break a sweat just a little bit. Just noticing as your body temperature is rising, the muscles are getting looser. You can feel the strength in your body as you're moving. And all the while you're anticipating the competition part, reminding yourself that you've trained for this, you've prepared for this, building that confidence. And let's fast forward just a little bit here to where you're getting on the equipment. So as part of your warm-up, choose an event or part of what you compete in. Just choose that now and go through the warm-up that you would for a meet. I'm going to be silent a little bit here while you imagine that for yourself, since I know that will be different for everybody, but just taking a moment to get your body going, get the warm-up going, feeling confident about what you're able to do and what you're going to be able to show the judges. Just take a moment and go through that on your own a bit. And now as you're finishing up your warm-up, let's again fast forward to the competition itself. And again, I'd like you to choose a routine that you want to imagine, whatever sport discipline you're in, whatever event you choose. And it doesn't really matter which one, just that you choose something. You'll have lots of time on your own to do the other events if you want to, but choose a routine, a competition routine that you'd like to run through in your mind. And as you do it, you're going to be seeing your performance, you're going to be feeling your performance, maybe being aware of the noises around you or the noises of the equipment as you do your routine there. Let's take a moment and go through that routine. Again, I'm going to be silent while you do that on your own. And as you're coming to the end of the routine, feeling confident, feeling satisfied with what you've been able to perform today, imagine yourself nailing the last part of the routine and finishing up. And taking a moment to hold on to that sense of accomplishment, the strength you have as an athlete. Remembering both what you did physically and mentally for this competition. So physically, the actual performance, and mentally, how you approached it. Whether you had good confidence, good management of your anxiety, did some good breathing or mindfulness. Just remember the things that you did that allowed you to be successful. And you can imagine the meet coming to an end, the competition finishing, that sense of accomplishment and maybe a little bit of relief that goes along with the end of a meet. Taking a deep breath in and holding on to that positive, that sense of accomplishment, the confidence that you maintained, the performance you put forth. Just holding on to that right here, right now. keeping that image in your mind. And remember, you can take this with you through the day to the next meet. You might have felt some nerves as you went through this exercise. That's okay. That's actually helpful, because we all need to learn to work with the nerves. They're never going to go away completely. So if this brought that up for you, realize that that's part of competition, and that's what we'll be facing again. But we can work through them. We can work with them. So take the positive from this. Lock that in your mind. Remember that as you go forward to your next meet. And I'm going to slowly bring you out of this imagery experience. So you'll notice that the images begin to fade, grow a little dimmer as you're coming back to the room. You can move your hands and feet, arms and legs, head and neck. One more deep breath. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes. So thank you for joining me on that today. And I hope that you were able to imagine what it was like to be in a competition. You can use imagery for anything from single skills that you're trying to learn, to series, to half routines, all the way up to the most important competition that you've been in. So you can use it for any aspect along the way when it comes to your training and competition. And I see that there are a couple things in the chat, so let me see. I have a question here regards to using visualization in addressing fear issues with gymnastics. Yeah, okay, so that is actually one of the key things that imagery can be helpful with. Now, and fear comes from a lot of places. So it is helpful, first of all, to know where it's coming from, and that's probably a session all in itself. But if you have a sense of where it's coming from, and perhaps it's just one of those mental blocks that we tend to get, there hasn't been anything really negative that happened before, there wasn't an injury, there wasn't a near miss, because those are reasons why, you know, it's reasonable to be fearful and probably needs to be addressed in a different way. But if there seems to be just, you know, the athlete is ready to do the skill, just a little bit fearful, imagery can really help. So that's where maybe before coming into the gym, you spend some time running through that skill or that part of your routine in your mind's eye over and over again till it starts to feel natural and comfortable. And you also want to really focus on the kinesthetic part of it. I think that's something that we leave out sometimes, but that kinesthetic part is really helpful when dealing with a fear. So over and over again. And then that has to be combined with doing it over and over in the gym, whether that's with a spot or some kind of progression, but getting to where, you know, you're feeling more and more comfortable, almost until you're begging to do it, you know, and really ready to get past that fear. So so the fear question is pretty complicated generally, but if it's just a very straightforward thing about fear, imagery can be really useful. But I would say that's not going to be the only answer.
Thanks, Karen. Again, if you have questions, throw them in the chat or in the Q&A. Either one is fine. So I really appreciate all this information. I think it's really great. These are great tools for coaches and gymnasts to have. So as I was listening to your information on imagery, I'm wondering if you can maybe elaborate on when it might be more helpful to use imagery versus mindfulness, which we heard about last time.
Well, both tools are very important. So I would say you want to integrate both of them into your training regimen. But mindfulness is the purpose of that really is to be in the present moment and to be in tune with your experiences, whatever they are, to be open, to be curious about that. And it's a way of training focus. So it's a little bit different, I think. Whereas imagery is very specific, you know, we're trying to imagine the actual skill or the routine or a certain situation and deal with the nerves that go along with that. So I think with with mindfulness, that's something that we probably want to do outside of the gym as many days of the week as you can, just to really create that sense of being grounded and centered, and learning how to bring your mind back when it gets distracted. I think that's a really good foundational skill. With imagery, you can use that more as you're preparing for competitions, getting ready to do a new skill, um, doing your routines when you can't train them physically, then doing them mentally outside of the gym, you know, whether it's from an injury or because you're being quarantined or what. So imagery can be really helpful in keeping yourself in the game, basically, when you're not able to do it physically. So I think that they can both be used and they both go hand in hand. They both really support each other, but they are slightly different.
So with imagery, is imagery something that an athlete should be doing daily as a matter of course, or really only when there's a specific skill or fear or something that they want to work on overcoming?
Well, I would encourage doing it pretty consistently. I'm not going to say daily because that's setting up an impossible goal because there's going to be a day you miss, right? But I would say making it a consistent part of your training routine. So the days you go to the gym, maybe you take 5 minutes, 10 minutes to do imagery either before or after, somewhere along the way. You've also got if you're doing mindfulness training, you've got that too. So maybe you alternate days. One day's imagery, one day's mindfulness. You know, you might go back and forth just depending on what your need might be. But I would say do some mental skill every day that you train, and then maybe give yourself a day off on the weekend or something. But, you know, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, you can do more if you want, but you can get something out of 5 minutes or 10 minutes if that's all the time you have. And it makes it be a consistent part of what you do. And that's where you're going to get good at it.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. I remember in your first webinar, you talked a lot about, you know, how much of gymnastics is mental, and we don't really spend time training any of that mental piece. So, you know, just encourage everybody to begin to train that mental piece if you're not already. So thank you.
Right, exactly. Yeah, you make it part of what you do. You know, you do your strength training, you do your gymnastics training, you try to eat right. Well, make sure that you're also training your mind, that your mind's in the right place too.
Yeah. I don't see any other questions right now. Is there anything else you want to add, Karen, before we sign off for today?
I don't think so. Just I really appreciate all of you guys joining live and walking through this with me. And you know, if what I did with you wasn't quite what you want, make it up yourself. Do your own thing. It's really just only limited by your creativity. And then I will send my slides to Kim and she can distribute them. My contact information is on there if there are any other questions. But other than that, have a great day and keep the mental skills going.
Thanks. Thank you, Karen. Appreciate your time.
You're welcome.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
everybody.